may want to consider moving up. By that I mean, please move forward. We're going to start even as people trickle in, because we like to be on time here. The SWIG program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice at the University of San Francisco acknowledges our presence on unceded land of the indigenous Ohlone communities. It pays our respects to these traditional caretakers and elders, past, present, and emerging. It is our intention that this acknowledgement plays a role, in however small, in our much larger process of confronting the past in order to create a not yet realized future rooted in justice. Welcome everyone to our third event of the USF SWIG program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice program of the fall semester. My name is Rabbi Chel Mandel. Hello. And I teach in the SWIG program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice, and I direct the JEDI program. I want to begin by thanking the SWIG JSSJ faculty and staff for their hard work in making tonight's program possible. Thank you. I'd like to take a brief moment and tell you about the SWIG program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice. Founded in 1977, our program is the first Jewish Studies chair or program at a Catholic university anywhere in the world. It's pretty cool. In 2008, we were reestablished as a SWIG program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice, the first academic program worldwide to formally link Jewish Studies and Social Justice. Including a minor in this field in the classroom, the program offers a wide range of significant Jewish Studies courses not found in other educational settings. Beyond the classroom, we offer extraordinary events that are free and open to the public, such as tonight's event. Through the SWIG JSSJ program, we believe that education is the best long-term way to create systemic change. Whether one has the time to take a semester-long course or a mere few hours to hear from a single speaker, education is fundamental in making our world better, paramount in shining the spotlight on the margins, on oppressed communities who are mistreated merely because of their race, ethnicity, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or another social identity altogether. I'm going to hand it off to Rabbi Camille Angel to introduce our awesome guest speaker for the evening. And I'm personally very excited to do some learning.
Good evening, friends. To be able to bring Yiscah Smith to the University of San Francisco is a privilege and a delight in my rabbinic career and time as an instructor here at the University of San Francisco. Yiscah, you are a beloved teacher, spiritual activist, and thought leader, renowned for your diverse palette of scholarship, including the Chabad Institutions of Torah, the Jewish Theological Seminary, and independent scholars in Jerusalem. Your teaching blends with self-transformation, offering a space where spirituality feels both timeless and deeply personal. Tonight, you'll guide us through conversations on resilience, faith, and the evolving nature of Jewish Torah study practice. We will explore how the Hebrew Bible, when studied, can deepen one's spiritual practice and connection to the divine. Yiscah, your story became known to me early in my efforts to find role models for my students, especially as an elder and mentor to students who are non-binary, gender non-conforming, and trans in particular, who may or may not have come from religious traditions that either do or do not include or recognize their divinity as children created in the image of God. So when I first began to investigate you and your story and saw the movie of more than 10 years ago called I Was Not Born a Mistake, a documentary movie in Hebrew and a life and body of work from more than 10 years ago, which my students have found and can read and can you in 40 years in the wilderness, my journey to authentic living. But I knew I would welcome you to this campus to meet with my students who are breaking bread and the binary in my queering religion courses. And here you are on your second book tour. You'll be speaking at Congregation Emmanuel, my home congregation, and Congregation Sha'ar Zahav, where I served for 15 years. Both spiritual communities that I've been invested in for the time of 25 years that I've lived in San Francisco. Online and in the classroom, you bedazzle us with your courage and your perseverance to be your authentic self. In your own words, you're a grandmother, a Torah scholar, an Israeli. You had a life of more than 15 years in the ultra-Orthodox community. You teach people all over the world, drawing out the light of Torah and helping people find connections that are deeply relevant and compelling. Before I welcome you to the podium, I'd like to say a few words about Torah, about the Hebrew Bible. Tonight, you'll study with us words of Torah at least 3,000 years old. Not only the content of Torah, but its form is ancient as well. We keep the Torah in a deliberately archaic form, a parchment scroll that is written painstakingly by hand. We keep these words in their original language, Hebrew, and we chant them in a traditional melody that has been passed down for many generations. Some ideas in the Torah show a very different understanding of the universe than our own. They are like a window into the world of 3,000 years ago. Other ideas were progressive, even revolutionary when the Torah was written, and remain so even in our own time. Torah sets forth ideals and dreams that we have yet to reach even in the present day. Torah commands us to pursue justice, to work for peace, to love a stranger, the one who is not like me. Torah inspires us to demand a society that is radically egalitarian, in which the law ensures that there will be an equitable distribution of resources and no one will go hungry. Torah instructs us to care for the natural environment and to cultivate it like a garden, like your garden. Reminds us to be sensitive and compassionate toward all life, including the smallest creatures. Torah teaches us that every person has been made in the divine image and is deserving of respect, regardless of race, intellect, physical capacity, gender, sexual orientation, or appearance. Torah calls us to free those who are enslaved, to protect the young, to have reverence for the old. Torah demands that each of us break out of the circle of self-concern and join in community, living life focused on the goal of creating a better world. Please join me in welcoming Yiscah Smith to teach us some Torah, her Torah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, where do I begin with that introduction? First, by thanking all of you, thanking you for attending what I hope to be an inspiring exploration through text of a much needed healing salve of how to bring some type of resolution. I call it spiritual conflict resolution. I also want to thank the SWIG program, though. Thank you so much for sponsoring, for hosting, for providing the container with which I can come from Jerusalem and share what I hope you will consider to be, if anything, a drop of hope, a little bit of encouragement. Back in Jerusalem in 1974, I was exposed to text. Even though I was brought up in a Jewish home, I was not brought up in a home where text was much of a priority. And in 1974, I had my first teacher of text. And when he started to teach, I knew that he knew a lot compared to me, who knew nothing. So he didn't have to know that much for me to think he knew a lot. But it wasn't so much the information. He had a sparkle in his eye. There was a spark, as if what he was going to convey to us from the sacred tradition going back even more than 3,000 years really mattered. And I remember going for my master's degree in Jewish education, I said to myself, that's what I want to do. I want my students to at least see that what I'm teaching is really important to me. It may not be important to you. I hope it is after I complete my little sharing here, but at least know that what I want to share, what I feel compelled to share, enough to write a book about these sharings and bring it all over the world, is because I want to be part of the solution. I don't want to continue to be part of the problem. So what I've done is I've taken the various weekly Torah portions that the Rabbi Camille mentioned. We have the Torah scroll, the first 5 books of the Bible, and the tradition is in different synagogues, each week we read out loud a portion of those first 5 books of the Bible. And it's a year cycle, so every year after Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, we then conclude the holiday season with celebrating once again the annual reading of each of the portions. In my book, recently published by both Jewish Publication Society, JPS, and University of Nebraska Press, UNP, I've extracted from each Torah portion a gem, a seed, a sparkle of spiritual awareness to sow, using the metaphor of a garden, to plant in our inner garden of spiritual awareness of the divine presence. So what I thought I would share in discussion when we were talking about what, I can't bring all 47 in 20 minutes, obviously, the one that I feel most called right now because of the climate, the political climate, the cultural climate, just the milieu in which we are, it's like we're groping in the dark. There's so much confusion, hatred, anger, extreme responses to other people's opinions. I really would like to share this piece, and I'm honored and humbled to contribute to what I think may be part of, not the solution, but part of a solution. And I titled it, as you see on the source sheet, which is an excerpt from the book. This is my book right here, Planting Seeds, right? Planting Seeds of the Divine. That it's titled Spiritual Conflict Resolution. And why I just did not write conflict resolution, because it isn't that. My main argument is that the reason why so many of us are struggling to bring some type of resolution when there's conflict is we keep resorting to the same modalities, which I would argue are very ego-based. It's almost like a survival-based type of instinctive drive where I have to prove that I'm right because my survival is on the line. That for me is a limited, finite, narrow way of operating in the world. Because when it comes to survival, it's always about either me or you. And if you're going to win, I'm going to lose. I, though, argue for the higher consciousness, which we call the spiritual consciousness, an awareness that there's a part of us that is not just about surviving, it's about thriving. And the thriving comes from a commitment to lead a life where there's values, there's commitment and dedication to something that goes beyond the everyday getting through the day. I hope this is making sense. I really, really do. So that's my argument that I'm presenting. Let's dive right into, I don't have time to read everything in the text, but what I do is bring for each chapter where I identify the seed to be planted, the verses from that weekly Torah reading that support that. So the verse in this case is one verse, and God said to her, I just want to introduce who's the he, who's the she. So Rebecca, Rivka in Hebrew, Isaac's wife, maybe some of you know those biblical characters, was barren and was not able to conceive. They prayed for many, many years. Eventually she did conceive, And her pregnancy was very painful, very, very painful. And she inquired. She actually brought it to God and said in her intimate conversation with the divine, for this I became pregnant. Tell me what is happening here? What is going on? Not in a sarcastic or in an angry way. She wanted to see or appreciate there was meaning in this struggle. So this is God's response to her. God said to her, 2 peoples are in your womb, 2 nations from within your bowels shall be separated. 1 nation will gain strength and prevail over the other. And then the verse ends with the conclusion, and the elder shall serve the younger. You'll see how that's a very important, well, every word in that verse is important, but that really is the answer to the question, how do we bring spiritual conflict resolution to our lives today? So if you jump down to at first glance, I present to the reader what in the rabbinic tradition, the medieval commentators address as an apparent, obvious either problem, inconsistency, something that's not making sense, or just something that's worthy of paying attention to. So here we see that this is the first time someone actually goes to God and says, what is happening to my life? If you study the earlier, like Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebecca is the first to experience something and then question it. And already I would suggest that's part of spiritual conflict resolution, is to recognize there's a problem here and I need to address it. Because if I don't, it's like an infection. If we don't clean out the cut and we ignore it, it's only going to get worse. So then this in utero conflict between these 2 brothers foreshadows an ongoing sibling rivalry even after their birth. She gave birth to these two boys. They have very different personalities. One, Esau, or Esav in Hebrew, Esau, that's the first, he was born first of the twins. He is driven to fulfill his physical needs in the external world. He's the one who goes out to the fields. He's the hunter. He brings home the food for the family. He's a man's man. And his modus operandi is representative of the first divine step when the human being was created, going back to Genesis 2, that God formed from the earth this body called the human being. Now, his brother, Jacob, in Hebrew Yaakov, maybe you're familiar with that, focuses on the internal world. He remains inside his tent, which is a metaphor for that which is opposite of what Esau was doing, going out into the field to hunt and to gather. So he's in the tent and he devotes himself to being in communion with God, meditating and praying. This is also a way of providing for the family, but spiritually. His modus operandi is said to embody the second step after the formation of the physical earthling, infusing it with a soul. And the one blew into its nostrils the breath that gives life, and the human became a living soul. So what do we see from this? Every one of us is a piece of Esau and a piece of Jacob. We have a body, we have a soul. So Esau and Jacob, though, clash. They clash over receiving their father Isaac's love and attention. Favoring Esau's manliness and valuing the sustenance he provides, Isaac rewards him with his attention. You know, the biblical families, there's a lot of dysfunctionalism. We really do ourselves the opposite of a good deed. It doesn't serve us well when we idolize them, when we look at them as they're the perfect human being. They're not perfect. Their greatness is that they're not perfect. They're imperfect. And here we have a situation where Esau, the man of the field, he felt more loved by his father than Jacob. So this leads into the conflict between the physical and the spiritual. Jacob's basic and unfulfilled human need to be loved by his father blinds him even into deceiving his father Isaac, pretending to be Esau in order to receive a special blessing that his father wants to give to his brother. Metaphorically, then the brothers' conflict can be understood to spotlight the complex tensions between physical and spiritual needs, between the body and the soul. This struggle, everyone, this struggle is basic to the human condition. I believe right now, I would suggest, if it's ever so evident how it can tear us up, is because of what's happening right now in the world. I mean, I live in Israel with the tension there. You live in the United States with the tension here. Then there's Europe, then there's Africa, then there's South America. Nobody is spared from this tension, this disunity. Which weighs more heavily on my mind, ensuring that I have food, shelter, and clothing, or ensuring that I sense purpose, meaning, and human connection in life? Now today, a lot of us are in the middle of this boxing match where people are manipulating. There's this unsatiable appetite for power, and there's violence, and there's disrespect. So what part of the person is being fulfilled with that? The survival instinct. But then there are people like me and others, and I'm in good company with a lot of others, where we want to bring unity. We have values, we have ideas, we're optimists. We're not resorted to be victims of our own survival instinctive drives to just exist. My intuitive idealism directs me to answer both matter. It's not either the body or the soul. And I seek a peaceful resolution between these two. Perhaps it is not necessary to choose. I think it's a sacred practice. It brings a lot of hope if we take ourselves out of this paradigm of either it's this or it's that. Why not look for harmony? Why not try to blend the needs to survive physically with the need to thrive spiritually? So the conflict between Esau and Jacob is said to extend far beyond the two of them. While some people believe they really did exist, they do exist spiritually right now in this world. There are people running around, they're Esau's. There are people running around, they're Jacob's. And then there's most people that feel they have both, like when Rebecca was pregnant with both inside of her womb. I feel that at times, like there's this conflict, and then that's what we bring to the world. So we're called upon to really bring some type of resolution. I want to be aware of the time here. Okay, let's move to the deeper dive. Because the deeper dive really, because it's the deeper dive, we go into the soul, into the non-physical, into the Jacob inside of us that can help us resolve this conflict with Esau. I first bring a rabbi from 18th century Belarus, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of La'adi. He teaches that the rivalry between Jacob and Esau represent an inner conflict inherent to the human condition. It is a metaphor for the struggle between two strong primary energies within each of us. The divine soul and what's called the animal soul. Jewish mysticism understands the animal soul as absolutely essential for our physical vitality. We have something in common with the animals. Those of you who have dogs and cats know. They need to eat, I need to eat. They need to sleep, I need to sleep. We have a lot in common with the animals. This soul is enclosed in our blood, which is the physical entity that keeps us alive along with the oxygen. The soul of the flesh is in the blood. And our physical blood is the essential life-giving force sustaining our physical bodies in all of its functions. It understands as well, meaning Jewish mysticism, the divine soul as absolutely essential for our spiritual vitality. The life-giving breath of the Creator, originally blown into Adam and Eve, continues into the present. We receive this divine gift of life through our inhalation and then return the gift through our exhalation. So we have blood running through our veins and arteries, and we have air and breath running through our bodies. So we are experiencing the unity of the two. So that's why, as an optimist, if I can be aware of the unification of the physical part of me with the spiritual part of me, what do I need to do to cultivate this awareness within me and then project it out to all of you? And I wanted to say that regardless, I'm looking at all of you, obviously I don't know you. Whatever you think politically, however you are economically, wherever you choose to live, whatever your views are, matters to me if it matters to you, but it doesn't matter to me in terms of, may I connect to you? Because what I have to connect with you is the belief of spiritual conflict resolution. We can respect each other not because we are different, but because we have something that unifies us. And that is the soul that's inside of us. And it allows us to manifest different personalities, different likes, different dislikes, different cultural rituals. As the breath flows through us, animating our soul, blood circulates through us, keeping our bodies alive. What the breath means to our divine soul, the blood means to our bodies. Together they can sustain both a healthy body and spiritual vitality. However, when the human condition pulls a person to one of the extremes, we feel this inner tension. It could even be an imbalance. It's not always where everything's just going great. I really feel I'm feeding the body, I'm feeding the soul. I'll go out into the world and I'll bring that idealism to the world where we'll just unite our bodies and souls together. Doesn't that sound lovely? So why isn't it happening? Because the end of the verse right now is not what's happening. If you go back to the beginning where I quoted the verses, most of what I quoted has to do with the acknowledgement of these two opposing energies. But what does the end of the verse say? The elder shall serve the younger. That is the key to spiritual conflict resolution. Let me continue. And then keep that in the back of your mind. The elder will serve the younger. So who's the elder here of the two brothers? Esau. He was born first, so he's the elder. He is going to serve the younger, which is Jacob. So what does that mean metaphorically? What does it symbolize? That somehow the realm of physicality is going to serve the realm of spirituality. This is called a higher consciousness and a lower consciousness. I'm going to move through this because I just want to summarize. The lower consciousness is the consciousness of the physicality. The higher consciousness is the one of spirituality, but it incorporates the lower realm of physicality. So Judaism, even in the most deepest mystical Kabbalistic traditions, does not believe in this either or. So either we completely indulge in the physical at the expense of paying no attention to the spiritual. That could be called hedonism or materialism. Or the other extreme, which may seem to some, well, maybe this is what the Jewish mystics mean. The other extreme is, I will focus my life only on the spiritual. But Judaism frowns on asceticism. It's not healthy either, because I have a body that needs attention. So the resolution is the body can somehow be part of this unified whole by being in service to it. So let's move to the next page. Well, in my book, it's the next page. Do you see where it says with these two frameworks? That's towards the end of this section, about 4 paragraphs. I'll wait for everyone to be there to get to that place. With these two frameworks in mind, what I did was I just expanded what I just summarized. That if we go to either extreme, that's not going to bring resolution. And I do believe, I would argue strongly, that's part of the problem right now. We have gone to extremes, and we can't find resolution with extremes, even if it's a spiritual extreme, because the older has to serve the younger, according to how the verse would depict resolution. So, with these two frameworks in mind, this and that, we might ask, how can I cultivate a practice of spiritual conflict resolution and reach internal harmony between my inner Jacob and my inner Esau? Is this really even possible? Like, how many of you looking out into the world today, whatever the current events, I mean, look, my flight, I wasn't dropped from a Stark into San Francisco. My flight was delayed a little while, then we were on the runway for a little while till I got here. Now you times that, times all the airports, with all the flights, with all the people coming and going, that's a conflict right there. That's a big conflict. How do we resolve this? Is it even possible? I suggest that we can. And in the most serious heart of hearts, what I'm going to read now is not just my idealistic side. It is, but it includes my realistic side. Through love, compassion, mindful practice, and internalization of yet another important teaching in our verse. That's the elder shall serve the younger. I say through love, and I say through compassion, and I say through mindful practice, because that leads to internalization, where this really becomes part of my zeitgeist, if I may say. That I don't see the world through either the lens of physicality or spirituality. It's through a whole. It's through this composite that I love every part of who I am. Not just my soul, or not just my body. With compassion. What's the word? In Latin, it's compatio, and that means to connect with another in suffering. We're all suffering right now. We're all suffering for different reasons. Why don't we use that as a means of connecting, where we can then support each other and encourage each other? To the degree that I can internalize through mindful practice every day some type of inner harmony, I can give you my best. I can honor you. I can encourage you. Again, your views on this or your views on that, that's already lower consciousness. Not that it doesn't matter. But what matters is, how do we solve? We solve from the higher consciousness. And that's why I bring down the end of that verse, the elder shall serve the younger. The Esau in us, which is the physical side of our lives, needs to serve the Jacob in us, the spiritual side of our lives. From the inner calling to reach from merely surviving to thriving, we can pursue the quest for meaning. We can act on our drive to pursue a life punctuated by devotion to an idea or a belief greater than our limited selves. In this way, the ever-present conflict between these two internal powers continues, but the means to resolve it abides as well. We can acknowledge the physical side of ourselves and work to quiet down its urges. To quiet, not to obliterate, not to annihilate. Just, you're hungry, you'll have to wait another 10 minutes. I'm in the middle of writing a paragraph for my book. And I actually experienced this when I was writing the book, just because I'm in the middle of coming up with this great idea doesn't mean my body's not hungry. So you'll have to wait. I'll give 10 minutes, body. We'll take care of you in 10 minutes. I'm in the middle of writing down this thought. You see, that's the tension. But you can bring resolution because I didn't say to my body, too bad, you're hungry? Too bad. You'll eat when I give you food. I mean, those of us who have pets know that that's cruel because the animal is depending on us to feed it. Well, my body's depending on me to feed the body, my own body. From there, we can employ, once we quiet it down, then we can employ it to help manifest our spiritual side. What I do, in addition to teaching spiritual texts, is I guide meditations. And I invite everyone, before we even go into a meditation, go to the bathroom, have your drink of water, assume a position that's comfortable, stretch out like this so you can feel energy moving through you. In other words, take care of the physical side before we use that to enter the realm, the higher realm of the spiritual consciousness. So again, it's not either or, it's really both. One, though, supporting the other. Giving meaning and providing structure to how we engage with the physical world can actually enhance our devotion to our spiritual center. And I'll give you an example. In the Jewish tradition, we have dietary laws called keeping kosher. You probably are familiar, you may know someone that keeps kosher. Now, if you ask 10 Jews, you get more than 11 opinions what it means to keep kosher. I'm giving you the spiritual understanding that what kosher does for me, it helps me eat mindfully. I don't just grab anything because I'm hungry. So because I'm committed in one way or another to the basic spirit of kashrut, I'm more aware of what I'm eating. And because I say a blessing over the food, I'm acknowledging that there's a source to the food, and that's what I'm in relationship with. So it could be popcorn, it could be fresh fruit, it could be fish, whatever it is we're eating. Could be a healthy snack or sometimes not such a healthy, like if my grandchildren at times want a snack, their idea is a lot different than mine. Whatever it is, by saying the blessing, and also you slow down and you eat more slowly, which every doctor knows is healthier. So there's a coming together, and I hope you're grabbing this, that it's, no, I'm not going to eat because I'm spiritual. I will eat, but I will eat in a way that supports also my spiritual ecosystem, if I may use that phrase. By gently honoring and harnessing one part of ourselves, rather than trying to viciously destroy it. Isn't there enough violence in the world right now? I don't need to destroy a part of me as part of the solution. We may be able to bring harmony and integration not only to our inner lives, but then to the world at large. And that really is the end goal in this case, is what do I bring to the world? What do I bring to conversations? What do I bring as I engage with all kinds of people? If I bring this type of inner consciousness, I'm bringing more of a whole person, where there is resolution internally to therefore bring towards externally. I'll give you an example. I do meet people who disagree with me. Of course, that's going to happen. So instead of saying, I disagree with you, what's wrong with you? How can you think like that? What does that do right then and there? Well, that comes from my place of survival because I feel attacked. So I'm going to attack back, just like an animal in the jungle. When does an animal fight back? When it feels afraid of its own survival. Instead, I've learned to say, you know, even though, and I had this with an acquaintance, she and I had very different opinions, very, very different opinions. And I said to her, what I'm hearing from you is such love, and such compassion for the issue. I want to honor that. I disagree vehemently with your opinion, but I honor how committed you are to promote compassion. And we hugged each other. We hugged each other. We both came out winning, so to speak. We didn't, what's the word? We didn't push back. We didn't make it seem like either you're right and then I would be wrong, or I'm right and therefore you would be wrong. We didn't threaten each other. Could you imagine living in a world where you can actually have different opinions and not feel threatened by them? And she said to me, she said, you're one of the first people I've met that holds such an opinion. I could actually hear your love and your compassion. And this inner voice said, this is because I'm devoted to cultivating this. This doesn't come naturally. It does come naturally if we open up that treasure chest of awareness. But if we only stay in the lower consciousness realm, it'll never happen, because that's the realm of surviving. So I conclude this section by saying, by doing so with love, with compassion, with awareness, we cultivate the midah, which in Hebrew is the quality trait, or the sensitivity idea, the idea of becoming more sensitive to that piece of ourselves that's not physical, that we don't see with our physical vision, but we sense it with our spiritual vision of awareness. Then we are cultivating this spiritual conflict resolution. And this is where our spirit, everyone, is enriched rather than threatened by the physical, employing the physical to advance and sustain its integrity. I do provide at the end of every chapter a practice, a spiritual practice of visualization. I'll let you read that on your own. It allows the reader to live with this idea through the course of a week, and you may want to adopt it from time to time. In conclusion, this is my idealistic and yet I believe practical way of negotiating and moving through these very turbulent waters that we're living in right now. The degree to which we become more spiritually sensitive and then incorporate and use the physical side of us, it prepares us much better, much more adequately and effectively to go into the world and really not be threatened by it, but to be able to contribute light instead of adding to the darkness. Thank you very much.
We have an opportunity to ask you questions, and we have at least one mic to come around. I'd like, if I can, I'd like to ask you the first question. But I'm counting on my students to follow up. There are index cards, but I'm not going to distribute them. I'm just going to ask you to raise your hand. I'll bring you a mic. So I guess the question I have in listening to you, I have two questions. One to start with is, how does do you have suggestions for how to find, cultivate, discover, listen for your spiritual consciousness? Like,
yes, I do.
Yeah, okay.
This is part of what I do. As I have had teachers that answered that question that I asked, I've learned to do the same for when someone like yourself asks the question. The answer, though, is not like a recipe to bake a cake. It requires not so much time, but consistency. This is where less may be more. This is what one of my first teachers said to me. You need to curate, you need to carve out, you need to cultivate and dedicate time every day. Every day you wake up, cultivate, curate, dedicate a certain amount of time. He recommended the goal would be 20 minutes. I'll say realistically, in my own life as I started and we're working with students all over the world, 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Probably for most people, it's soon after we wake up in the morning, before we go out there. Before you check your emails, before you check your WhatsApp messages. 5 minutes and sit in a comfortable position and simply be aware of breathing. And I don't want to oversimplify. I dare say this is so important. There's nothing simple about it. 5 minutes a day times 7 is 35 minutes. This is what my teacher said. Those 35 minutes are much more than if you do it twice a week for 20 minutes each day. Because you're building a muscle. You're building a muscle of awareness. And the more you return to it and return to it and return to it, the more it's going to begin to not change you, but help you become aware of a part of you that's already there. So this is one. There are many, many modalities. This is the one I started with. I continued to employ it, and I teach many people. You put your fingers by your navel, or you put them over your heart, and you begin to inhale. And as you're receiving the breath, be aware of the fingers separating or your heart beating, and just become aware of the sensation of being breathed into. I like to think of it not so much as taking a breath, but receiving a breath. As God, the Creator, breathed the breath of life into Adam and Eve. And as you're feeling that life-giving force move through your body, just be aware of it. Listen to it. It may make a noise. Feel your fingers moving apart and back. Lock it into, assign it an anchor that can keep you focused. You do this for 5 minutes. I can almost promise you the first couple of times, this is what she said. I'm going nowhere with this. You got to give it. This is not instant gratification here. This is building up a muscle. For those who have built up muscles in strength training, there was a day when you realized, oh, I have a tricep. Where did that come from? That came from a lot of dedication. It was always there in potential. So this is one way of beginning. There's many, many other modalities. Some people who are able to be in nature more, I would say go for walks. Not just a walk to go from the house to the store to get a dozen eggs to come back to the house. To go into nature in what we call like meditative walking. 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes. Just walk, smell, feel the breath move through you with nature. Instead of feeling outside of nature, you then begin to feel in nature. Because the same Creator that's breathing air into my body is what's happening with the plants when they receive the carbon dioxide. So we are in sync. People do feel a little bit more vulnerable to sensitivity of the divine when they're in nature rather than in a more urban environment. Look, I'm in San Francisco. It's a city, but it's a beautiful city. There are a lot of areas to do something like that in. Another is through music. Certain kinds of music really open up. Actually, some of the mystics, some of the Hasidic Rebbes, one in particular that I learned a lot from, wrote in the 20th century that music really, of all the keys that unlocks this door of awareness, music is the most effective. And that can be done with other people together, where you can be sitting together with a few other people and you're listening to music and you may start chanting in some of the yayais or daidais or the words, if they have words, and you really feel much more of a connection to your soul through the music. Those are just three examples.
Well, I have about 15 other questions, but no, I'm hoping that there'll be students who have questions, and I'll give you the mic. Raise your hand. I'll come to you.
I have a question over here.
Yeah.
Can you, is the mic off or I'm not?
You talked about the physical in being a necessity for informing the spiritual and something that has to be taken care of. How does the spiritual inform the physical?
Okay, that is an excellent question. And because it doesn't have to. Let me explain. There's a rabbi who passed away in 1935, Rabbi Cook, Abraham Cook. He moved to Israel, and he lived in Israel from 1904 to 1914, and then he went back to Europe, World War I, came back in 1918, and he settled in Jerusalem until his death in 1935. He was considered to be the first official Ashkenaz, like European, chief rabbi of then British Mandate Palestine. And he wrote the following: "We live in two worlds." This is how he understood it. I called it the higher and lower consciousness. He called it two worlds: the world of the physical, the world of the spiritual. The world of the physical is the loud voice outside of us. We don't have to cultivate any type of mindset of mindful living to be aware that we're tired, or to be aware that we're thirsty, or to be aware that we need to eliminate waste. It's very obvious to us. So the problem with that is if we don't pay attention to our spirituality, it will be drowned by this louder voice. It will always be in the back burner, because the more obvious, which is in the front burner, is the physical side. However, when we put the spiritual in the front, at least through the Jewish tradition informs the physical through the spiritual lens, which is why, in fact, we don't encourage asceticism, which is, I believe, what you could be referring to, taken to its extreme. And we have a proof for this in the Bible. There is a classification of people, it's called the Nazarite. And the Nazarite is someone who feels they need to be less involved with the physical world to express their spirituality. They're few and far in between. It's not something that's encouraged, but it's as if God made a compromise. Since God created us all, God already knew, if I could use that term to God, that there'd be people who were a little bit more sensitive. So God had, the creator in the Bible allows for this. It's limited in what they refrain from, and the time period is limited. And when that cycle is over, they need to bring an offering. This is when we had a temple in Jerusalem. They need to bring a very specific type of offering. Now, there's all kinds of offerings. There's Thanksgiving offerings, there's holiday offerings, Sabbath offerings. The type of offering, though, that was required really explains and really tells us and expresses why this is not to be encouraged. A sin offering. The person is expected and told to bring a sin offering because it's as if the person is saying to God, you made me, but I know me better than you know me. And I want to live a life where I'm not indulging in the physical. And so God is saying, I'll meet you halfway. I'll give you a year or whatever the limited time is. So you don't drink wine, you don't get a haircut. There's a few pieces that are adopted. But afterwards, when you come back into the community, you need to bring a sin offering. Because if I meant for everyone to live that type of a life, you would have been created that way. So as someone who cultivates and who's dedicated to cultivating the life that's spirit-driven, I very much employ the physical. I love the physical. I like to eat nice food, to wear nice clothes, to have nice art in my home, and I very much use it, though, to serve the spirit. And in that sense, it has even more meaning. So. Yeah, let's get this room moving here. I was told I didn't have a lot of time to teach because I was going to receive like 100 questions.
Hi.
Hi.
You told this story about how you spoke with a person that disagreed with you and you hugged at the end. How would you say you speak, like if you're in a conversation like that, but the other person refuses to accept your answer and accept, like, you say, I respect your answer, I don't agree with it type of thing? What would you do if someone like refuses that? Like, what's the way?
I would acknowledge what I see, There's a book called Nonviolent Communication. I don't know if any of you have heard it. Marshall Rosenberg wrote this several years ago. It's a different way of communicating with people. It's called in Hebrew, where it's taught in Israel, compassionate communication. Communication that connects. In Hebrew, the word is tikshoret, and that means there's a connection. However, all I can bring is part of it to the table. I can't bring all of it. So I have met people that are not interested in connecting. All I could do, and this is what I do, is observe it and say, I observe, I see you're not interested in a conversation. If there is ever a time that you feel you would like to probe this a little further, my door is open, my heart is open. I see right now, though, your door is not open, and I respect that. And I walk away. And do you know, it has an effect, because that's a kesher, that's a connection right there. I'm connecting to where that person is, and also at times I have been like that, not recently, but years ago. So I know what it's like to feel fear. There's a fear there. It may be for different reasons than my reasons were, but we all have moments of where we fear the other. And one way is we put up a wall that, quote, protects us, but it also keeps us from connecting. So the best thing we can do is just acknowledge it. You're welcome. You might as well stay on that side of the room. I don't know what's going on here. People, chevre, as we say in Hebrew. Hi. Pardon me?
I did have a question.
You have a question?
At what point in your life did you start to formulate this concept of spiritual conflict resolution, and why?
Okay, well, we can go as far back as Adam and Eve were created. When I entered the more orthodox traditional world, because I don't come from that type of a family, but in my searching for meaning and searching for depth, I had already gone to Israel a few times, and I really fell in love with the country. I realized I knew very little about my history. Growing up in the States, in New York, I didn't even know when I went to Israel and I came to Jerusalem, and I was told that this wall is a special wall, and everyone goes there to pray from all over the world because it's a remnant from the first temple and the second temple. I didn't even know what the person was even referring to. But I did have a feeling that I was at a place where there was meaning. And I wanted to figure out what the meaning was. So it led me into studying Jewish history, the Bible, not from a religious text, not as a religious text, but just as my history, like the book of the prophets or the kings and judges. It's all about the history in Israel, the ancient history. And then modern Zionism. And that led to me wanting to know more about what it would be to feel God in my life. And that led me into the more orthodox world. And what happened was this inner voice that moved me, that prompted me, that called me to find out more about tasting God in my life, encountering God in my life, began to be on the back burner, and intense observance of the mitzvot became in the forefront, like in the front burner. So my life became, without me even intending, it was all about making sure I did the mitzvot, the commandments, right. Well, what about God? What about my soul? You're doing God's will. You're doing God's will. And after 15 years, I realized, how did I get here? I never really wanted to live in that world. I thought they had the answers. So I left it. And then I went on this period of time where it was a dark period. It was like, I can't live with the Torah and I can't live without the Torah. So I realized there has to be another way to live with the Torah, because I can't live in that version where my quest of the spirit of cultivating a spiritual awareness was pushed to the back burner. So eventually, about, I'd say 20 years ago, I started to pursue other avenues of consciousness within the Jewish tradition. And it's not necessarily in what people here would call the Orthodox world. It's a more of we call it the renewal world. It's the world of moving the spirit to the forefront, and the observance of the commandments, while they have an importance, they're not the most important piece. And it's been in the past 20 years that I've studied those texts that address that, more in the mystical tradition, what's called Hasidism, and even Neo-Hasidism, which came from Warsaw, also actually Buber in Austria, but more in the 20th century in Warsaw, with certain figures that were predominant in revisiting the spiritual text and kind of updating it like a upgrade of an operating system, like Hasidism 2.0 after 1.0. And then it just led more into spiritual meditative practice, contemplative practice. And that becomes then on the front burner, where now what's most important to me is my sense of closeness to my soul. Whether I observe this law or that law and anyway, 10 Jews, 11 opinions, how to observe the law, that's not as important to me anymore. Being with God, being with my Creator, being with the soul, with the we call the Shekhinah, the divine presence within me. And it took years, it took several years of kind of switching the consciousness and the mindset to living a life of the soul, of that soul-driven. And I will tell you, as a Jew who lived in a very insular, very limited, exclusive environment, I live now in I could come to USF not knowing anyone except the rabbi, and here I am in a room with all of you, feeling as comfortable as I would teaching in a class in Jerusalem, because it's from the soul. And that's how you and I, regardless of the external ways we choose to live and how we think, you and I are very connected when it comes to our essence. So just knowing that and trusting that and sensing that is part of the practice, and also a result of the practice. You're welcome. Okay, someone on this side. Oh, good. Okay.
So earlier you said that taking 5 minutes a day to meditate and like think about your life, it's really beneficial for your life. But today, for us young people, it's really hard to concentrate. How do you do it?
It's interesting you said for us younger people today, because I've had students who have said to me, we're not young, like we're for us older folks, it's hard to do because we're not used to it. So what do I hear? The most important part is, how do I change? How do I adopt something that I'm not familiar with? Would you agree that that's what's under your question? Whether you're younger, whether you're older, we're living in a world that I'm suggesting that you change. So the first way I can respond to what you asked, such an important question, is, do you want to change? Do you want to? In the Talmud, it says that we chase after our will. A person's will is very, very strong. When we really want something, if we really, really, really want it, we move mountains to get it, to acquire whatever it is we want. So the question I would ask back, and this is very Jewish, is you answer a question with a question. How badly do you want that? Do you want to imagine what it would be like if you dedicated 5 minutes every day to being just with you? And to be aware, what am I feeling right now? As I'm breathing and I'm aware of being kept alive, what am I feeling about that? How do I think about that? If that's not something that you believe could perhaps enhance your well-being, you'll probably never do it. The will is the foundation for it. After the will comes dedication. People who take on a new sport, take on a musical instrument, take on, let's say, creative writing, whatever it is that requires that a person is now going to do something new, it's because there's a will and there's an agreement you make with yourself to be dedicated to it. And that's how I would answer that. And by the way, actually, there's not by the way, this is equally important. It's not a judgment if you choose not to. You may come up with another. I've only presented to you my offering. I won't say this is the only offering to bringing resolution to the conflict in the world right now. If you can come up with something, please let me know. Please. I think I've come up with something that has a little bit of history supporting it, some great masters in mysticism supporting it. It's definitely, though, not the only way.
Yeah, I have a question about, we talked about cultivating spiritual life. I feel stuck under capitalism to have space and time to be with grief.
Wait, space and time with what?
Like, be with one's grief.
Oh, grief.
There's not much space or time to be with it, because it's on to the next thing, and we live in a world with a lot of pain. And it feels, to me, watching the news, it's like one thing after another. How do I keep up with letting little bits of grief out as they come up? And often I just move on quickly. So I'm curious, where for you, grief and pain, and how do you hold that in your spiritual life?
Well, living in Israel, I could tell you, since October 7th, there is so much trauma right now. And having children and grandchildren in and out of the army. And Israel's a small country physically, it's a small population, and everyone's connected to everyone. So I am surrounded daily by people who have either died, people who are in therapy, people who are either who have been physically hurt, amputees, people who are suffering acute trauma, like the people who survived the festival, the musical festival, October 7th. It goes back to answering what you asked. The way it's not that I allow the grief, I make time for it. Yes, the world around me is sometimes spinning so fast. I have cultivated, dedicated, and really, with very few exceptions, every morning before I leave my home, I make sure to spend quality time with myself. And many times it includes grieving, the grief, even the trauma that I don't even know that I am holding. I was giving a talk last week in Boston, and it was at this beautiful big synagogue in Boston, and all of a sudden I heard this noise. It turned out to be some of these big like tractors, or like they were doing some construction in the area. Do you know, I actually flashed back to the sirens in Israel. I thought it was like the booms of the Iron Dome. And we've been trained, when you hear the booms, then the siren's going to follow. I wasn't there in the room for a minute. I was ready to hear the sirens. And I said to everyone, this is trauma. And it didn't disturb me. I don't feel ashamed. I don't feel embarrassed that in front of as many people as here, I just blanked out. I need to honor that if I'm going to heal from that. And having, one daughter coming out of the army now, a granddaughter, another one going in, then a grandson going in, and the granddaughter that came out, just by extension, she's my granddaughter, so I'm taking her trauma. She saw some things that at 22 years old, I couldn't ever have imagined seeing. So that's the dedication. I give myself a container for it. If I don't, it lingers in the back of my heart and mind all day. So I can spend 5 minutes crying, weeping to God, yelling at God, screaming at God, what's wrong with you? How could you allow this? And then I feel held by God. I feel encouraged where God is like, in essence, giving me the container for me to be real with. What you're talking about is a raw emotion that needs a container. You can't ignore it. And I'll push back a little, if I may, on part of what you said. I would not blame anything on capitalism. I would blame, if I would blame, I'm not the type that assigns blame. I would ascribe what you're talking about to materialism, which is very different than capitalism. So the materialistic world is a form of idol worship. So if I make sure not to buy into that, look, I love shoes. I'm not going to hide that fact. I'm not embarrassed, but I don't buy a pair of shoes in order to be happy. I don't buy a pair of shoes in order to make me feel better when I feel trauma. So we need to honor that. Somehow it's come about. We only want to honor the good times. We only want to be aware and acknowledge and share the happy moments. But I can promise you, I can promise you about anything, to the degree that you deny part of you, you'll never even maximize the joy, because that also will be compromised. So I hope at least that begins an answer as a response to your question.
Hi, thank you for talking in our class earlier.
You're welcome.
And for this, I had a question pertaining to gender and transness, because this is talking about both the physical and the spiritual, and gender is both a very spiritual, very internal thing, but also very external, very social, how you present to people. And I'm just wondering sort of how do you see gender in this balance between the physical and spiritual and how they inform each other?
I will honestly say, in the past 10 years, this is the first time someone has asked me that question. Kol hakavod, as we say, more power to you. I just don't know how to answer it right now. I have to think for a minute. I have to think. I guess it's similar to how I just responded. It's really a matter of honoring one's own being without the judgment, also without conditions. We can learn from the at least the midrashim, the narratives that came about in the 3rd to 5th century, long after the creation story. But we can learn from the creation story through these teachings that Adam and Eve, there were two components to how they were created that was unique to only the human being. First, they were created in the singular. Everything else was created, blades of grass, granules of sand, schools of fish. But it doesn't say that with the human being. We were created as one entity. And not only in the singular, but not even like one man and one woman, one entity that was both man and woman. So we started out in the Garden of Eden in a way non-binary. Like, it was only when there was the separation. And I was just discussing with a friend of mine today, we had lunch together, haven't seen each other in years. It was so wonderful that everybody has both, from going back to that creation story. It wasn't that this like separate creation of you're all male, you're all female. It wasn't that. Predominantly in terms of to procreate the world and to bring a generation into the world, that was more or less, in most cases, not all, in most, there was the male participation contributing factor and the female. But gender as an expression, I think it really, I can say in my own life experience, employing or cultivating a higher consciousness, that I couldn't have done it any other way. It just made so much, it was such a support for myself that there's something in me that's beyond all of it. And once it's beyond all of it, it doesn't have to be any longer contained in a very small little box. Does that make sense? And I'm serious, no one has ever, you're getting it fresh. This is fresh. I never, what?
This is one of my brilliant students.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now, that being said, it also involves the body. It also involves dressing a certain way, how you see you, how you want people to see you, how you go about your day physically, which I would, as I mentioned earlier, which the spirit in you is employing the physical to be your true self. You're welcome. That was good.
Hi, thank you so much for speaking. I really enjoyed it.
You are very welcome.
I'm wondering, kind of moving back, once you decide and dedicate time to like having a stronger connection to your spiritual self, do you find that some people can go throughout their lives still not reaching that higher?
Just that last sentence, did you find,
Do you find that people can still go through their whole lives not reaching like that sense of higher self, even while doing meditation, religious or spiritual practices, etc. that you covered?
I would say most people right now don't. You know, there's a phrase, it's a little quip. There are people who make things happen, there are people who watch things happen, and then there are people who wonder what happened. And it's kind of like, it's tragic comedy that most people end their lives like, how did I even get here? It's like if you're driving on a road and like you have to get off on exit 42 and then all of a sudden, oh, it's exit 44. Well, how did I get to exit 44? If we don't make an effort to become more aware, see, this is the type of a muscle that is like the tricep. You're not going, you could live your whole life without it, without cultivating this. But you may wonder, why do you feel something's missing? Because something is missing. And yet, we live in a world, we're surrounded by cultures that don't promote it. I'll even tell you, I was born in the 50s, the 1950s on Long Island. Never imagining at 20 years old I would fall in love with Israel, and that just changed everything. I came from a home with a lot of love, a lot of respect. I have two sisters. When my mom passed almost 11 years ago, my parents were married almost 66 years. They were high school sweethearts. I mean, they wrote romance, you know, like normal people don't live like that, right? And there was so much love. There was so much holding space for each other without using that term. And I will tell you, I never heard the word soul. In 18 years till I left to go to college, I never heard the word soul. I never heard the word spirituality. And my parents were busy raising children, doing what people did in the 1950s. They were good, kind people. I learned from them a way to live ethically that I only learned later is incorporated into some of the Jewish literature called the Ethics of Our Fathers, Pirkei Avot. I was brought up with that, but there was no sensitivity to the deeper dimension. My parents passed, my mom in her 80s, my dad a year and a half or 2 years ago in his 90s. They did not intentionally cultivate a mindful practice. And I do believe they didn't maximize their potentials as a result. Because if they were that wonderful without it, imagine if they did that. So now I'm left in the world with two sisters who we are so close, so much love, so much care, and we have such different lives, such different lives. They don't cultivate spiritual practice. And they ask me, how is it I can live in a country with so much war, so much like so much of the trauma, especially with my immediate family, and yet I don't appear very angry. I don't appear very like stressed. And I told them, because I cultivate this, because they're the two of them are walking time bombs right now. I mean, they feel so betrayed. They're so angry. They're so this and so that. And I just want to invite them into cultivating a higher consciousness. It's as if I'm talking not even Hebrew to them, and a whole nother language that's not even on the planet Earth. And they're good. They're wonderful. I mean, they're kind. They're my sisters. And I love them so much. And yet, they're not cultivating this. So it's I don't want to sound like a dogmatic rabbinical figure. Like, if you don't do this, you're going to, right? No, it's not that at all. But I do believe if we don't become more aware of a deeper part of ourselves, we're not able to maximize our potentials. That's my belief.
I have a question about the tension between these texts being interpreted by fundamentalists, religious fundamentalists, and like this text in particular. So without, in 8 minutes, I mean, this Esau serving as an elder, the younger, can you somehow encapsulate, how do you take back the text to be interpreted in this way, in this spiritual way, when this is also a text that's used as a justification for the elder to serve the younger?
Okay, I really thought you were going to ask about something else in terms of.
I'm trying to ask it in a
Yeah.
wise way.
Okay, so let me. Okay. Everything I present.
Who knows what I'm asking?
I could promise you, as sure as I'm sitting here right now, and I don't often say what I'm going to say, that I am sure that what you have heard me read, that the fundamentalists in the Jewish tradition would totally push back on. Totally push back, because Esau has been demonized in Jewish tradition. And Rabbi Sachs, who was the chief rabbi in the UK, quite orthodox. I would not say, though, he's a fundamentalist, because he was very expansive in his secular knowledge. He said there is nothing in the text that even alludes to Esau being a bad person. You ask any fundamentalist rabbi, Esau is the kernel of evil. And that came about as a response to the Second Temple being destroyed, because the Romans somehow they figured out, they interpreted, came from the lineage of Esau. So it was only in the Midrashic literature, which came about in what now is Persia, Iran, which was Persia, in the 3rd and 4th centuries, where all of a sudden Esau became this kernel of evil. So that's the first problem that someone like me has, because I don't see it in the verse. Esau was more physical and Jacob was more spiritual. Meanwhile, Jacob was the one who deceived Esau. Esau didn't deceive Jacob. So it's not black and white. The idea, though, of the elder serving the younger, it's only because the way we were created, we first were created in the physical, and then we were created in the spiritual. The spiritual, the breathing of the breath, going into this physical form called the human being. So in this case, the elder is not so much how we see today, like even in Jewish values, where the elder has a high regard. No, on the buses in Israel, there's a quote from our Mishnah, from sacred, "Before the elderly you shall rise." And I will tell you, when someone older gets on the bus, it's expected that someone younger will get up, whether they're religious or not. The problem today, though, by the way, is everyone's like this with their phones, right? They don't see that someone older just got on the bus. But that's another issue. So the elder here is like, which came first? Well, the body came before the soul, so therefore the body then is in service to the soul, rather than if the soul, and this goes back to a question someone over here asked, if the soul were meant to be in service to the body, forget it, it already lost. So it's not how we see older people in terms of biological age. It's what was created first. First the body, which actually is the container for the breath, it's the sacred container. So that's how I would interpret it. If you're going though to the fundamentalists, you'll get a very different, very black and white, a type of approach that usually distances more people than not. Which, yeah. And they should live and be well.
I have time for one last question.
Okay, here we go. We remember first what we learned last.
In your talk, you've talked a lot about will to start things and try things.
Yes.
And also about starting and trying and being open to a lot of different new experiences.
Yes.
Further than what you spoke about, that's really hard to do. What's some ways that you've been able to kind of keep doing that again and again to develop this technique of spiritual resolution?
You know the phrase, this is a win-win or a lose-lose. The worst that can happen by me trying is I'll realize that modality or that practice, that's not really meant for me. But what have I learned in the meantime? Rather than, well, I'm not really clear, I'm not really sure, you know what? It's not for me. That's a lose-lose because I'll never know what I lost out on. I'm already convincing that I'll lose, so why bother? But if I'm more open, and that's how I approach new obstacles in my life, well, at least let me, again, as another one of my teachers, I've been so blessed with amazing teachers. Instead of trying to figure out the answer where it's a right or wrong, be a curious explorer. It's like if you go on a hike and you're turning that bend, you're not really sure what you're going to see. Maybe what you see is like amazing, or maybe what you see is really, that's like, you know what, I'm going to back up and go on, take the other fork. So be a curious person about your life. See, I never had to sign a dotted line. I never made a lifetime commitment. Today, I got up here in San Francisco, and I'm living my life for today in the way that I believe brings out my best. That doesn't mean tomorrow it'll be the same. Maybe next week or maybe in 6 months, something will happen in the external world or in my internal world that will put up an obstacle. And I will be the curious explorer and try to negotiate it. And it may mean that I need to change a little or not change a little, or uncover a certain potential that was never realized, or maybe I just need to be more aware of that. So the best answer to your question is there is no answer other than showing up. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you for showing up. Thank you for opening up for us some pathways to connect with our own spirituality. So much of being an active participant in our education is to stay up here and spend all of our time trying to negotiate with the meaning of the books. But I think you're giving us a compelling opportunity to think beyond just being in our heads, but bringing our whole selves to our learning and taking our learning out into the world, being our whole selves. So
It's holistic. Actually, it's holistic living. It's a mind, body, heart, soul. That is the spiritual conflict resolution. It's employing all parts of me working together. The book is available on Amazon or bookshop.org or at your local bookstore perhaps.
or with your rabbi, we have a few copies.
Or with your rabbi.
Office.
Yes.
Well, give it up for thank you.